actually mean by boundaries. Fundamentally, boundaries really help us to live our lives fully. They actually give us freedom, because when we're clear on what's acceptable to us, what's acceptable behavior and what's not, then we're able to ensure that boundaries aren't crossed, that we feel comfortable with the behavior or situation that we're in. And boundaries can be around emotions, our relationships, our time, our space. And they help to bring integrity into our relationships. And they protect our well-being and the well-being of others. They promote a healthy sense of a self-concept, our own self-concept and self-respect. And, boundaries ultimately help us when we're clear. We make better decisions because we know what feels right for us. And when we're able to respect our own boundaries, that helps us to respect other people's boundaries. And there's some really common reasons for why we can find it difficult to actually create a boundary for ourselves or hold to a boundary for ourselves. These are really common reasons. So we might hold back on saying something because we want to be liked. We want to be that person that says yes and helps people. Or we maybe have a tendency to be a people pleaser. So something might not feel right for us, but we still go ahead and say yes, or we allow something to occur because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And sometimes what might prevent us from putting a boundary in is that we just really don't know how to actually say no, or we don't know how to actually respond to our boundary. So these are really common reasons for what can hold us back from setting a boundary. But there can be signs that we actually need to set boundaries. So a sign can be that we often maybe put up with behavior that really we don't want to, but we're finding it hard to address. Or we're noticing that we feel taken for granted. Or we get just too involved in other people's problems and it's extending us too much. Or this is a common one. We can feel some pressure, even guilt, to say yes to something, and then we're really regretting it afterwards. And we just know deep down inside that we're not really being true to what feels right for us. So these can be signs that we actually need to set some boundaries. Whoops. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to start talking about some steps you can take to actually create boundaries. And before I get into the steps, I just want to stop for a moment and I just want to check in to make sure this is all making sense so far, or if there's any comments or questions before we get into the step side of things.
Hi, Bernadette.
Hey, Bridget, nice to see you.
It all makes sense. Like I say, these days, I think any self-help, self-growth classes that you can take are to your betterment, whether you have unhealthy boundaries or not. So anytime I take any of your classes, it's just like a really nice refresher course. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks so much, Bridget. I appreciate that. Okay, I'll bring my screen back up and I promise to stop again. So when it comes to setting healthy boundaries, what can be useful is to think about your needs. And sometimes we know our needs ahead of time. Sometimes our needs, we might be clarifying them in the moment. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So you might know that that you're a morning person and there's certain activities you want to do in your morning. So you protect it. You don't say yes to things that are going to interfere with your morning routine. So you're very clear on that. Or you might have a certain time that you like to go to bed. So you don't say yes to things that might impact that. So you know that ahead of time. So you're very clear on that. Sometimes somebody might be asking you to help out with something, or someone might be inviting you to a dinner function, or someone might be wanting you to participate in a certain community group. Or someone says something that all of a sudden you're noticing in the moment doesn't feel comfortable. So sometimes, as I said, we know our needs ahead of time. Sometimes something might happen on the spot, or we're asked to participate in something, and we are actually needing a moment to check in with ourselves. So one of the things that can help so much with creating boundaries and setting boundaries is to not only think about our needs, but to also build our awareness, our self-awareness, to start to understand what feels right to us and maybe what doesn't feel right. So for example, if someone says something in the moment and it's maybe disparaging of another person or putting someone else down and you're not feeling comfortable with it, you might notice that. And by becoming aware of that, you may then choose to say something because someone's crossed a line for you. They've crossed a boundary for you in terms of the way they were speaking about somebody else. And I'll say more about that in a moment. The next step that we can take and become aware of is being clear on what we want to commit to. And again, sometimes we know this in advance. We're really clear, and sometimes things are coming up in the moment. So for example, if somebody's asking you to help on a committee, or someone's asking you to help plan a party, or someone's asking you to help prepare a dinner, this is where you really want to be clear on what can you actually say yes to. So if someone asks you to help with something and you end up saying yes because you feel like, oh, I really should help, you're feeling a little bit of guilt, then often what happens is we can find ourselves in a situation where we've said yes, even though we know we have a lot of other commitments and maybe some pressing demands. And this is really something that's going to stretch us, and we really don't have the time for it, and we're only doing it because we feel guilty. So there's a big difference when we become aware of that and we get clear on what we can commit to. So if someone asks you to help with something and you're not sure, because this is something that's happening in the moment, you might want to say, you know what, I need to check my schedule first before I can